On May 24th, Robb Elementary School experienced the single most prolific school shooting in Texas history. 19 children, 2 teachers, and the shooter himself all died. Now, a preliminary investigation revealed a series of things that seemed awry. Police officers testing keys when the door apparently was unlocked. An office that didn't exist that the police chief was apparently in. And waiting 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds to even attempt entry of the room where the shooter was barricaded. What happened? And how can we make sure it never happens again? You're watching Politics Corner. Stay tuned.
Hi folks, welcome to Politics Corner. Hello Ishaan.
Hello Pallavi. Before we talk about Uvalde itself, before we talk about what happened, everything that failed to happen, which is what we're going to talk about, let's talk about the debate which it reinvigorated, and that is, of course, gun control.
Gun control.
This is a very consistent pattern. Whenever we have any kind of mass shooting event, logically, of course, we see then gun control activists talking much more about their issue. And so here is basically the Democratic Party platform right now.
Addressing the nation last night, argued that the Second Amendment to the Constitution is not about taking away anyone's rights. It's about protecting children and families. The president called for a ban on military-style assault weapons, along with expanded background checks. He also wants to raise the age to buying a gun to 21 years old.
So obviously this is the question that comes up every time that we have any major shooting event, and that is, what degree of gun control is appropriate for America? Now, voiding the issue of polarization, voiding the issue of the Second Amendment, do we ever actually do anything about it? What do you think?
I mean, you hit the word right. It's polarization. I think all of America stands up to debate. They're either on one side or the other. I always see Facebook debates crop up, WhatsApp debates crop up, where people demand gun control, ban on assault weapons, or protection of Second Amendment rights. It's a zero-sum game, right? It's a 100% take away all the guns that exist, or allow our Second Amendment, and somehow the other side perceives that to be that you're sanctioning school shootings, which again, I don't think is the case, but those are the type of debates you see on Facebook. Of course, the same people, I think you had mentioned this on one of your shows, we're all getting horribly normalized to these type of tragedies. So we'll see these debates for 2 days, and then the same people, are going to be back to posting about their breakfast or their vacations. And America goes back to normal until we come to, another such tragedy. And I mean, that's the stark reality.
Well, I think that the fundamental problem is that we have legitimate arguments on both sides. With most major political issues, it typically boils down to this person is wrong, this person is right, because of one fallacy or another. But in the case of gun control, it is truly a weighing pros and cons, and it's not exactly clear who is clearly right. So I think to some extent, people try to avoid the issue because they know that there is no clear winner. And I think that the other problem is many people are pretty solidified in their beliefs about guns and gun control, so people feel like there is no benefit to continuing to talk about it. It's going to remain a polarized issue. So why don't we talk about it? Why don't we go against the grain in that sense? The fundamental argument is, assuming that there were only 2 options, get rid of all guns, or everyone can have a gun, give it to your 2-year-old kid, let them wield it. Identify the benefits of getting rid of all guns. What do you think?
Well, number one benefit, of course, is if you were able to get rid of all guns, and by the way, I only say that in theory, because again, the practical implementation of that is still going to be questioned. But let's say you are somehow able to eradicate all guns in America. The number one benefit, of course, is that we don't have mass shootings.
Right. And then if I were to identify costs, I think you sort of hit the nail right there when you said, well, I question the practicality of that. Yeah, I question the practicality of it too. I don't think you're ever going to truly get rid of every single gun. Yeah. So people who choose to actively disobey that law will still have guns. They will still maintain their weaponry. And the cost, of course, is that you're depriving law abiders of their ability to defend themselves from non-law abiders.
Yeah.
So then, of course, crops up the question, okay, what degree of gun control? Maybe within those polars, something can prop up in the middle that might be a valid option that would satisfy both sides. So I think you were the person, actually, who told me this sometime off stage. You're like, well, we don't have nuclear arms. We don't have the legal ability to have them. We obviously can't have hand grenades without permits. Why can't we extend that to assault weapons?
Yes, I mean, that's one thought, one school of thought, right? Like, we already, to some extent, already have some extent of limitation in our right to bear arms. It's not like we can own any weapon that we want.
So I actually agree with you on the basis of that claim. What I question, though, is the practicality of eliminating all assault weapons. One, to some degree, I do feel like the people who truly want them to commit egregious acts will find a way to get them. Maybe not the ones who have more psychologically deranged motivations for mass shootings, but I do think that true criminals or like terrorist organizations, I feel like they'll still get their hands on them. But secondly, I actually started researching this and I learned the term assault weapon is largely made up. It pretty much refers to rifles with specific types of modifications that make them easy to mass kill. The problem is those modifications can be easily separately purchased and implemented on the rifle. So then what? Do you want to ban all rifles? Maybe?
Yeah, it again, like, if I were to go sort of pro Second Amendment, for a minute, I kind of do see the point where folks who say, well, we're law abiding, we followed every rule there is, we practice safe gun, ownership rules, and we only use it for hunting or we only use it for our own protection. Why would you penalize us when, as you said, for someone who truly wants to go out and commit an egregious crime, they're going to find a way to get their hands on a gun?
To your point, a couple years ago, there was a shooting in our area. And I remember seeing this news story, I believe it was Gavin Newsom. He implemented a bill that basically said that they were going to impose a tax on gun owners, and all the funds were going to be used for victims' relief, for mass ownership. And he literally advertised this bill like, we're going to make the people responsible pay for the cost of the impact of their gun ownership. And I'm looking at this and I'm just thinking to myself, these aren't the people who are responsible.
Right.
Anyone who is paying their, okay, maybe some people, but most of the people who are paying their taxes on their guns are not the criminals who killed people with their guns because they're in jail or they're dead.
No, and I think you'll get into this later, but I would argue that some of the mass, the persons responsible for those mass shootings were actually victims of society, usually failed education or foster care systems, so maybe they should pay the tax.
Fine, then maybe if you can't do assault weapons, because again, that's like a made-up term, why don't you do all rifles? Well, okay, I actually looked this up. I thought maybe that's an option. Only 3% of all gun deaths are actually from rifles. That's data from the FBI. So then I kept digging, and I found out that the numbers don't necessarily represent what I would have initially thought just as a layman. So, for example, in the year of 2020, only 38 people died from mass shootings, according to the FBI. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. Well, yeah, all the schools were closed in 2020. You can't have a school shooting on Zoom. I thought that too. But believe it or not, the year 2020 actually marked the highest number of active shooter incidents since the year 2000. So, are we trying to solve all gun deaths, or are we trying to solve just school shootings? Another statistic that surprised me, 55% of gun deaths are only from suicides.
Yeah. I don't think we'll be able to solve all gun deaths. As you said, year 2020, schools were closed, but unfortunately it was one of those highest stressful, years for everybody. I mean, and some people just, who were already vulnerable and to the edge, just, chose to take their lives, unfortunately, and weren't able to get the help they needed.
Exactly. So I think the other thing is, when we're talking about the majority of gun deaths, the first one is suicides. The second category tends to be gang violence or organized crime violence. And so in that regard, I feel like that needs to be dealt with as a separate issue. So if we're talking about what tends to get the public very, very upset, I think that the problem that we're really trying to solve is school shootings specifically.
Or mass shootings, yeah.
Yeah, mass shootings specifically. I think mass shootings of public areas.
Correct. Because I feel like the reason it resonates a lot with everyone is because they feel like that could have been me or that could have been my child. Again, these are pretty indiscriminate. You have one lone psychologically deranged shooter, and he gets his hands on the weapon somehow, and he's out, trying to kill anything that he sees, sets his sights on.
Right. Yeah. So, all right. If we are to accept that the problem we are trying to solve is school shootings, it's not world hunger, what would you say the Democrats' actual goal is in that mission?
Don't get me started on the politicians, because here's my question to you, right? This is something, again, I've looked at schools in Asia, and I try to draw parallels. Here's my question. Why can't we have a perimeter around the school? And why can't we just have an armed guard on the entrance? Have limited entrances, have an armed guard on the entrance. That will solve, at least for the most part, this problem. This is how schools are in Asia. Like, I went to school in India. I had like a boundary wall around my school. I had a gated entrance where I had a guard. If you came in late, you had to enter. Visitors needed to enter. It would protect the children. But there's no way any Democrats would agree to this, because this was proposed. And you know what they said? Oh, that's like keeping our kids in cages. Why? Is your home a cage? You have a fence around your house. Does that make it a cage for you? But no, the idea is that it always has to be extreme. It has to be an extreme yes on, no, let's keep banning the assault weapons. That's going to be dead in the water. It's not going to fly with, 50% of Americans, but it will help keep the country divided, and we can keep polarizing our base and making sure that they align with us.
Exactly. And I think, to your point about why can't we just do that? I have seen so many videos of people saying, well, we already do. I have actually seen teachers on social media actually going like, oh no, we already have security guards at our schools. We already have that. That's not the problem. Guess what? Uvalde didn't. The school I went to school in a completely open campus. I mean, no fence. I mean, in most cases, there weren't even like bars that would block a car from coming in. You could drive, if you were crazy, onto the grass and right up to a classroom. You'd probably damage your car, but you could. And in terms of walking on, there is absolutely nothing stopping you. You could sneak around the school naked during class and no one would notice.
Well, they would notice.
Well, if no one walked through the halls, I mean. There was no one checking for naked people in the halls.
Yeah. I mean, again, to me, the thing that annoys me most as we see this going on and on is that it has to be a zero-sum game. And so this is the conclusion that I've come to, that this is just a platform for our politicians to stand up and argue for or against weapons instead of actually solving the problem, because there are multiple ways we can solve this.
Not just politicians. I think that we need to acknowledge the fact that this has gone far beyond politicians. It goes all the way down to activists to some extent, who I don't think are doing it for this purpose, but I think are following the lead of others. But more importantly, I think the media, who is very much in bed with the Democratic Party at this point, their goals are all aligned. I've heard people coining the phrase the Democratic Party machine, referring to members of the media and the politicians and the party officials and the activists, because they all operate sort of in a block-like structure for different reasons, but with the same end goal in mind.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, it appalls me that we're supposed to be the richest, most developed country in the world. And again, we can't take a page off of countries like Asia and India. We have guards outside of government buildings. If you go into the airport, you're checked for what are you carrying in your backpack. You cannot get a gun through that. If you go into any administrative building, it's the same thing. You go to the courthouse, it's the same thing. But for schools, no, please, everyone welcome. Whatever you're bringing is absolutely welcome. And no, because if we put that, somehow we're endangering our kids and putting them in cages. It's so stupid to me.
Right, and I've heard people talking about, well, we need single point of entry. And I heard some, I can't even make up a nice word. No, total idiots, either idiots or intentional misleaders on the media responding to these clips and responding to these statements saying, isn't that a fire risk? No, you dunce. There's one entrance. There's multiple exits. They just close and lock behind you.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's not a zero-sum game, guys. I think the one purpose I hope that our podcast does reach is it just opens up people to possibilities and saying, what's that immediate problem? Like, you said it very well. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We don't have to solve every single problem here right now about, gun access and gun control. Crazy people are shooting up schools. That's actually the simple problem statement.
Exactly. And what they're going to say is, well, you could just not sell to potential school shooters. To which I say, okay, identify to me an objective characteristic at the point of sale that tells you that they're a school shooter.
Oh, that one's easy. He writes it on the application.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah, I agree. If he writes it on the application, don't sell to him. Because he's stupid.
Problem solved.
But I feel like most school shooters aren't going to write it on the application. And they will say, well, you don't sell to people without background checks. You know what? Let me use Uvalde as an example. The person who bought the gun was background checked. He had nothing on his background. Because guess what? You typically only commit a mass shooting once in your life, then you either go to jail or die.
Yeah. But he did turn up on the red flag list, right? The red flag laws, he would have turned up.
No, he didn't, because no one reported anything that he had done to law enforcement. Yeah, he had killed a bunch of cats in his garage, and he was walking around with dead cats in a plastic bag. Members of his community were aware of him, knew that he was a loner. His mom was a junkie, a narcotic addict, that he lived with his grandma, who he also had apparently some grievances with. He was known to be bullied for his lisp. So he was very much a loner. He was very much what you would consider a psychologically deranged child, but nothing was reported to law enforcement. So in terms of his paper record, he's squeaky clean until the day it happened.
But I thought he had also talked about shooting up a school. He
did on social media. No one reported it. I watched the testimony of this with the Texas Department of Public Safety. We'll get into his testimony later. But one of the things he mentioned was it would be great if people had reported it. Often they actually blocked him because they felt uncomfortable. People even commented, what, are you going to shoot up a school or something? And he said, no, what are you talking about? Don't be stupid. It would have been great if people reported it. And he recommended to the legislature, you need to figure out ways to encourage the public to report these things. But law enforcement never had any opportunity to actually deal with it because none of it was ever reported.
Yeah. I mean, the more I'm reading up on school shootings in general and the general, again, reactions and behaviors of both the public and the politicians. And when I say politicians, I include media and...
the Democratic Party machine.
Exactly. I think I think less and less taking away all assault weapons seems to be the appropriate answer. It just seems like A, an overkill, and B, honestly, I don't know how much access are we going to be able to limit.
Now, of course, we're never going to fully eradicate school shootings. So then we must answer the question of, in the event, we prepare the school security, we prepare the perimeters, we prepare the tactical defense of the school. In the event that a shooter still tries to breach a school and to attack, what should we do? What should be the response from law enforcement? How should they deal with the situation? And the answer is just do the opposite of everything that these incompetent police officers did in Uvalde. Okay? The police waited for 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds before entering. Do you want to know what the protocol actually says about how long you're supposed to take to enter in an active shooter situation?
What?
Under 60 seconds.
That would have worked.
You're not supposed to wait for SWAT. You're not supposed to wait for rifles. It is supposed to be one officer who spots the suspect, instantly shoots. That was the doctrine set by Columbine. So the Texas DPS head, Department of Public Safety, his name is Steve McCraw, and he testified to the state legislature, the state senate in Texas, and he called the tactical response from the Uvalde police, quote, an abject failure. So this is clearly supported by the officials here.
Evidence that the law enforcement response to the attack at Robb Elementary was an abject failure and antithetical to everything we've learned over the last 2 decades since the Columbine massacre.
It's pathetic.
Exactly. So the police chief was Pete Arredondo, and we have some wildly inconsistent statements on who he is and all the things that he did on the day. For example, the school shooting took place primarily in room 111 and 112. He said that the room 111 was locked, but we have surveillance footage of the shooter walking in without encountering any locked door. He requested a master key, even though the police had a Halligan tool. If you don't know what a Halligan tool, it's basically like an axe-like thing for breaking down doors. You might have seen it in movies. It's kind of red, and it's curved, and on the other side,
it's like the firefighters, what they use,
exactly,
like an axe, right, to break into the room.
It's called a Halligan tool.
Yeah.
He started testing numerous keys on a completely different door just to make sure it worked when the door was unlocked the whole time, okay? We have quotes of him saying, we've lost 2 kids. We got to put those aside right now or else we're going to lose more. He's like panicking. He has no idea what to do. He's completely incompetent, and all the other officers are looking at him like, what should we do? There are some points in the testimony where this DPS head goes like, I feel bad about just going straight after him. But there are other points in the testimony where he just does go straight after him because you can't really defend the facts. The facts clearly point to him just being incredibly incompetent.
3 minutes after the subject entered the West Building, there was a sufficient number of armed officers wearing body armor to isolate, distract, and neutralize the subject. The only thing stopping a hallway of dedicated officers from entering room 111 and 112 was the on-scene commander, who decided to place the lives of officers before the lives of children. The on-scene commander waited for a radio and rifles. Then he waited for shields. Then he waited for SWAT. Lastly, he waited for a key that was never needed.
It's incredibly sad.
1 hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds. I can't get over that number.
No, it's just incredibly, incredibly sad.
Right, and there were also several problems that happened tactically with Uvalde, to our earlier point about school security and schools basically being built to be secure, beyond just posting security officers. So, for example, one thing that I found shocking, the external door to a classroom, some classrooms are on the edge, so they have external doors. You could close it, and from the inside, you could not verify if it's locked or not. You could only verify if it's locked from the outside of the classroom. Okay? So right away, that's an incredibly... I don't even know the words to say. That just seems stupid. Like, to anyone with common sense, of course, you need to verify that the door is locked. Even in your own home, when you twist the lock on your door, even to your bedroom, you probably can jiggle the handle and you can right away see that it is locked or not. So I think the big problem in this case was a lack of procedural familiarity. So one thing that I actually didn't know myself, but I assume that any law enforcement officer would know, the Texas DPS had said this in the testimony, contrary to Hollywood belief, just because the FBI shows up or some larger agency shows up, it doesn't actually mean that they're in charge. The person who has the original jurisdiction is in charge until they defer that position. And in some cases they do, in some cases they don't, for various reasons. But otherwise, all law enforcement officers are assuming that they're reporting to the head of the original jurisdiction agency. So everyone was reporting to the school chief, who more or less handled parking violations and school bullying for the last 3 years. At one point, he issued a statement to the other officers through cell phone saying he's in an office with the shooter, that he's negotiating the release of these hostages. So they think they're all operating under the assumption that he is in an office with the shooters. And what came out later was there is not an office in this building. He was in a classroom, not with the shooter, just trying to talk to the shooter through a window. So at any point, he could have ordered that the tactical response team go in now. But he didn't, because he apparently didn't even realize that he was the incident commander. So this is what I mean, a lack of procedural familiarity, an incompetence in terms of his industry.
A lack of training as to what to do. I mean, God knows we've had enough school shootings by now that we should at least train the on-site officers.
To our earlier point about the tactical problems and the way that schools are built, to basically, like I said, in my school, you could literally walk in naked, and if no one saw you, there was nothing stopping you. There were no walls, there were no fences, nothing. There was no perimeter, nothing. I mean, houses are built with more security in some of these schools.
They weren't built with any kind of inherent security, and now they're in denial that they need security.
Exactly. So, like I said, you can post 300 security officers at a school. If it's built like an open field, what do you want them to do? They have absolutely no tactical advantage.
I mean, now that you're describing this honestly does sound like the schools we all went to, the schools you went to.
I know, but so actually looking at the testimony made me reflect on my own school experience and realize, wow, we are sitting ducks in schools. And it offends me that we have politicians who are pretending like security is just the denial response. Security is the distraction response. What we really need is gun control. But what we really need is mental health. No, we don't. Those are things that you want, and you're trying to take advantage of the situation to advocate for them. There was actually a clip, unfortunately I don't have it here, but there was a clip of this testimony where the guy said, hold on, so we heard that there was some stuff going on with the radios. What's the problem? And the guy says, oh yes, the radios didn't work because the school was built with concrete, and you literally could not communicate through radio, even the radio that the school police officer had. And he just responds with, so you're saying we had a school police officer whose radio by design would not work in the school? And the DPS guy just goes like, I mean, to anyone with common sense, you look at that and you're thinking, how could someone have been so stupid when they designed this? And how was this never caught? How every single state in America pretty much knows very well how to make thousands of regulations, some of which we encounter in our daily lives, and we're like, that's stupid, that's stupid. You're telling me they couldn't think of this one?
No, I mean, again, like what you've already brought into light is much more. I mean, of course, the tragic loss of our kids is terrible. But we have to think about, what do we do from here? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, and about where do we go from here, one senator in this testimony actually just asked the DPS officer if we could change some things tactically to our schools across the state. What do you think we should change? What are your recommendations? This clip goes on for 5 minutes, but I shortened it just to get some brief ones.
The perimeter. First, the campus perimeter fence is inadequate to prevent threats from accessing the campus, period. The access points and the entrance gates are not controlled, and they do not guide visitors to one location. The classroom doors are vulnerable to all classroom doors being accessible from the hallways once in the building. Emergency response communication enhancement system, that goes back to the radio communications. There are systems, and we saw it after 9/11, when we had officers and firefighters that were killed in 9/11 because they couldn't get communications, they couldn't talk to them because of the concrete and walls, glass, and things like that prevented communications. And there is a way to expand or enhance communications by taking the signal, okay, and increasing that signal through antennas on campus in that regard.
There, you just heard it. You heard it from a public safety official. Don't Democrats love those guys? At least they did with COVID. They were willing to adopt anything that a public safety official said about COVID. We need to wear masks for the rest of our lives. We need to get vaccines proportional to our body weight. We need to put windshields on our desk. You loved all of that. Why can't you love this? These aren't even mildly inconveniencing to you. These don't change your everyday experience at the school. Talking about the locks on doors, the deadbolts, talking about the radio communication systems, these don't even affect you. But no, you cannot dare talk about actual solutions that would prevent another Uvalde from happening, because that would fly straight up against the promotion machine for the Democratic Party.
Do not buy into that mainstream hype of it's a zero-sum game. It's not either ban all guns or get everybody health support. Both of those options are very extreme and quite frankly ineffective.
Yeah, and to the point of what should we actually do to prevent another Uvalde from happening, I don't even look to gun control. I feel like that's an entire distraction from what is obviously the most top level and common sense solution. You talk about common sense reform. I'm thinking, okay, put a fence around the school. Give them some level of tactical advantage. Put a security officer there, just one. You're telling me that the richest country in the world can't do that? No, I know why they can't do that, actually. Because it would be enough. It would actually solve a big portion of this problem. And that's exactly what these people don't want. Because if the problem is solved, then they have nothing to talk about. It is incredible self-dealing. You know what? Every public building, every government building is defended with these methods. Yeah, when it comes to the politicians' own lives, they're very particular. But no, when it's other people's, they prefer their campaign. Quickly end these shows by asking you to write to Congress and to vote. And those are both very important things, of course. But I did not feel like it was enough. I just did not feel like much was going to come of it if only a couple people wrote to Congress. And so I thought, what more of a difference could I make? And in the process of researching this episode, I actually learned that police officers, more or less, are not responsible at all to serve or protect. They have no responsibility to help an individual in need. They have no responsibility to put themselves in the line of danger. And believe it or not, they also can't really be held accountable for any kind of negligence or incompetence or even blatant constitutional violations. Police officers more or less are genuinely above the law. And I thought that this was completely unacceptable, and so I wrote the LEAD Act of 2022. This is a bill that I'm introducing in the House, or rather I'm having lobbied to have introduced in the House, and I'm hoping that I can get enough members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, to support it, Democrats and Republicans included. I want this to be bipartisan. I don't want it to get stalled in any kind of political machine. If you want to learn more about the LEAD Act, please, first of all, write to Congress, tell them to support it. But secondly, come to my live stream tomorrow at 9 a.m. This will be on my Instagram, and it will be also published to my YouTube afterwards. You can learn all about the LEAD Act and why we need it, and exactly what it does, and exactly how we can make sure it is enacted. Okay? Thank you so much for watching, guys. Have a great day.
Hey folks, Pallavi here. Thanks for watching this episode of Politics Corner. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment. And if you want to see more videos like it, subscribe and click the notification bell so you know whenever Pegasus Brave releases a new video. Also, if you want to see more of our daily content, follow us on social media. Links in the description. We'll see you next time. Bye.